Fear is a universal emotion that all humans experience, but we don't often think about what happens in our bodies when we are scared. You might feel your heart pound or your muscles tense up, but did you know that fear can actually change the way that your brain looks? Hi, I'm here with Minute Earth. When you encounter a threat, whether it's a hungry bear or a pop quiz in your favorite class, your sympathetic nervous system kicks into gear. Part of your nervous system prepares your body for fight or flight by revving up your heartbeat and sending more oxygen and nutrients to your brain so that you can either run away from the bear or ace that pop quiz. The increased blood flow is so important to your survival that it even overrides your prefrontal cortex, part of the brain responsible for decision-making and rational thought. That's why you might find yourself frozen in fear or unable to think clearly when you're in danger. Your lizard brain takes over so that you can react quickly without having to think about it. But this process doesn't just happen in your body, it also changes the structure of your brain. A small part of your brain, called the amygdala, which is involved in processing emotions, grabs control and makes the rest of your brain react. So how does it do this? Let's go back to the bear. As the bear approaches, you notice its claws and sharp teeth. These threatening features trigger activity in the part of the brain that processes sensory information called the thalamus. From there, signals are sent to the amygdala, which is like the headquarters for fear. The amygdala receives input from the thalamus and other parts of the brain, including the prefrontal cortex. With this input, the amygdala determines whether something is dangerous. If the answer is yes, the amygdala activates other parts of the brain and body to initiate the fight or flight response. For example, the amygdala sends signals to the hypothalamus, which then tells the pituitary gland to release a hormone called corticotropin-releasing hormone, or CRH. CRH travels to the adrenal glands and signals them to produce and release adrenaline and cortisol, which cause your heart to race and your breathing to quicken. Meanwhile, the amygdala also sends signals directly to the brain stem, triggering the release of norepinephrine, which helps to reroute blood flow to the most vital organs. In other words, the amygdala acts like an alarm system. It receives signals, determines whether there's a threat, and then sounds the alarm by activating other parts of the brain and body to take action. But the amygdala doesn't just sound the alarm. It also modifies your perception of the world around you so that you're more likely to spot any new threats. When you're afraid, the amygdala inhibits the default mode network, a group of brain regions that become active when your mind wanders during introspection. At the same time, it activates the so-called salience network, which is a set of brain regions that help you focus on potentially important information, like the angry face of a grizzly bear. This shift in focus is thought to help you identify potential threats more quickly, so that you can escape or fight. Now we know that the amygdala plays a central role in the fear response, but how exactly does it do this? It turns out that the amygdala changes shape when it's activated. In 2018, researchers used magnetic resonance imaging to track the activity of the amygdala in 24 individuals while they looked at fearful faces. They found that when participants were shown a fearful face, their amygdala changed shape and grew larger. This finding suggests that the amygdala physically transforms itself in order to grab control of the brain when it perceives a threat. But the amygdala isn't the only part of the brain that changes shape when you're afraid. In a study published in 2023, researchers used MRI scans to measure how the brain's white matter changes in response to fear. White matter is made up of neurons that are wrapped in a fatty substance called myelin, which allows them to send signals to each other more quickly. The researchers recruited 24 individuals for the study, half of whom had a specific genetic variant linked to anxiety. Each participant was shown a series of images while the researchers monitored their brain activity, including images of human faces expressing different emotions. The team found that when participants were shown fearful faces, their amygdalae and prefrontal cortices became more densely connected through myelinated neurons. This structural change allows for faster communication between these two brain regions, which may help process the threat more quickly. And they discovered that this change was more pronounced in participants with the anxiety-linked gene variant. The authors suggest that this structural change could be a marker for heightened fear and anxiety in response to social threat. But our brains do more than just change structure when we're afraid. Fear can also change how our brains function. Neuroscientists have discovered that you can learn to be afraid by observing others being afraid. In other words, you can acquire fear through social transmission. Kind of like how you can learn something new by watching someone else do it. Researchers still aren't sure exactly how this happens, but they have some clues from studies on rodents. One study published in 2016 in the journal Nature showed that when mice observed another mouse exhibiting fear-related behaviors in response to a neutral odor, they started associating the smell with fear too, even if they hadn't been exposed to any danger. These findings suggest that the brain regions responsible for processing social information, like the amygdala and prefrontal cortex, are involved in this process. And a follow-up study confirmed that socially transmitted fear is processed in the same way as fear that is directly experienced in the brain. The amygdala plays a key role in both types of fear. Interestingly, you can also learn to be less afraid through social transmission. By observing another person remaining calm in the face of a mild threat, like a spider, you can reduce your own fear of spiders. One way this works is through exposure therapy, where people with phobias are gradually exposed to the things they're afraid of in a safe environment. By spending time with the feared object or situation, the amygdala learns that the thing you're afraid of is not actually dangerous, and this new information is socially transmitted to other parts of the brain. Another great example of the power of observation is a 2021 study on capuchin monkeys. The monkeys were divided into pairs, and one monkey from each pair was trained to associate a mild threat with a mild electric shock. Then the trained monkeys observed their untrained partners as they approached a blue or yellow lever. The blue lever delivered a shock, while the yellow one didn't. After observing their partners' reactions to the levers, the untrained monkeys quickly learned which lever was dangerous. And after just one round of training, their fear response decreased. So through social transmission, they learned to be less afraid. So it turns out that fear has a huge impact on our brains. Not only does it change the structure and function of the amygdala, it can also make us more or less afraid simply by watching others respond to danger. This incredible adaptability is what allows us to learn from our experiences and adjust our behavior accordingly. So the next time you feel a surge of fear, remember that your brain is not just reacting to the situation, it's also changing in response to it. And that's pretty scary. Speaking of feeling afraid, we are always working on scary things behind the scenes to bring you the most amazing videos we can. For example, recently our team got COVID day of, and we had to scramble to figure out how we would still make a video that week. But we were able to pull it together because we have a supportive team and a good plan. And with your support, we can keep exploring the complexities of our brains and the world around us. So thank you for being a part of our story and for being here.